It's always good to be on the FSU PC campus. It is for me an alma mater. In 2007, I graduated with distinction with a master's degree in corporate and public communication. Back then, there was no Holly Academic Center. And when I sat for my oral comprehensive exam at the conclusion of the master's program, it took place in a trailer here on the campus. And that trailer housed the offices of my advisor, Dr. Stan Lindsay, and other communication faculty. I was last year on campus in January in my capacity as the editor of 850 Business Magazine, which circulates from Pensacola to Tallahassee. And with Rainey Couture's assistance, y'all know Rainey, I led a panel discussion among 5 communication students, Justine, Michaela, Michael, Yaman, and Ethan. My objective was to discover the extent to which characterizations of Gen Z are valid. Are the students strong believers in higher education, for example? Are they tech-savvy, community-oriented, socially responsible, environmentally conscious, and especially open to online purchases? The collective response to that inquiry among the students was a lukewarm, yeah, I guess. With the readers of 850 Business Magazine in mind, I tried to explore the students' buying habits. How did they behave as consumers of information, products, and services? Where did they get their news? Would they buy a Chick-fil-A sandwich given the company's history of donating millions of dollars to anti-LGBTQ groups? As it happened, on the day of the panel discussion, Student Affairs was handing out Chick-fil-A sandwiches in the Commons area right outside this room. About consumer habits, I made some discoveries. As a group, the students primarily rely on social media rather than journalistic organizations as their primary sources of news. One student said flatly that he doesn't do news because I might be exposed to things that I would rather not know about. There was indeed some uncomfortableness about Chick-fil-A, but Michael said he would help himself to a student affairs sandwich if he were hungry, because they had already been paid for and might as well be eaten. Justine and Michaela said their buying decisions might be influenced by how companies react to incidents or allegations of sexual harassment or abuse. Still, the conversation was less than robust. What I was discovering, in fact, thankfully, was that I was meeting with young people who strongly resist the labels and greatly value individuality. Ethan said he didn't understand the point of labels. We're all human, he said. Are boomers people? I asked him. And charitably he said, yes, there would have to be. Toward the end of our hour together, the conversation did become animated, not because we landed on a hot-button issue that everyone was passionate about. No. Things got lively when we somehow found ourselves discussing water bottles. Justine had in front of her a large bottle, probably a half-gallon in size, that she uses to keep herself hydrated, and that she said she's prepared to use as a weapon if anyone ever attempts to assault her. Justine had customized and personalized her bottle with stickers of meaning to her. The other students chimed in, all owned water bottles, and all had festooned them with stickers to make them uniquely theirs. The water bottle had emerged as a metaphor, a symbol for individuality and the freedom that word connotes. As to the panel discussion, I had done a couple of things right. At some point, I let the conversation to take its own path. And fundamentally, I had met the students where they are, on their campus, in their dean's conference room. Attempted as a phoner or a Zoomer, the meeting would not have turned out as well as it did. The kind of rapport that results from sharing a room would not have developed. Meeting people where they are. It's the key to understanding and bridge building. Last month I traveled to Tallahassee and served as a guest lecturer in a magazine writing class at the School of Journalism at FAMU. From the standpoint of individuality and self-expression, the FAMU campus is spectacular. Students wear all manner of dress, ranging from formal wear to barely there. There are people who associate FAMU with the Marching 100 Band, but otherwise associate it with accreditation difficulties, a fatal hazing incident, and turnover in the president's office. Some people within my circle, upon learning that I was going to speak at FAMU, commented, "Isn't that an all-black school?" As if to suggest that I was bound to have a hard time relating to a non-white audience. What do you think you can offer them? But being racially unique in a room full of people is a circumstance that was not unfamiliar to me. For a couple of years, I served as the chairman of the board at BASIC, the Bay AIDS Service and Information Coalition. At the time, Valerie Mincy, a black woman, was the organization's executive director. Her staff was more than 90% black. I once spoke at BASIC's annual fundraiser, the Red Tie Ball, as a representative of the BASIC board. Attendees at the ball were black, with few exceptions. Introduced to the crowd, I stepped up to the lectern and began by saying, "I am here in the interest of racial diversity." It proved to be a good laugh line. The magazine writing instructor this semester at FAMU is a white woman who holds a doctorate in creative writing from FSU in Tallahassee. She has written a number of novels, including one that I'm currently reading. It's based on her work teaching at a prison in Jefferson County. I'm satisfied that the professor is a passionate and compassionate person with a good heart. The book that I am reading reflects that, but I was disturbed slightly by some of the things she said in preparing me to meet with her students. Some of them write pretty well, better than you might expect. Their grammar isn't that bad. They're struggling right now to come up with pitch letters to editors. They're having a hard time coming up with good story ideas. Nonetheless, I look forward to meeting with the students where they are. I spoke to them about my years spent as the editor of the Panama City News Herald and as a magazine editor. I talked about how community newspapers are drying up and how those that survive have limited appetites and resources for investigative journalism. I described how it was that I was once a finalist for journalism's most coveted award, the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service Reporting. With a colleague, I had written a series of stories about the torture of juvenile black inmates at the Jackson County Jail in Mariana. The boys had wound up in jail after acting out at the Dozier School for Boys, which, as some of you know, is the setting for Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Nickel Boys. I talk about magazines and how it is that most titles come and go with trends. I mean, how long do we expect Pickleball and AR-15 Recoil magazines to survive? But I sought to encourage the students too. I told them people will value writing of value, and then we got to work. I shared with the students the list of departments that make up Tallahassee Magazine, and then challenged them to write a proposed story lineup conforming to that template. It was an ambitious exercise, and the students had limited time in which to complete it. Each of 3 groups presented a lineup, and the professor couldn't what she was hearing. Students who had not come up with a viable story idea for a pitch letter had great ideas to suggest for Tallahassee Magazine. They were energized by someone who didn't hesitate to give them a difficult task and who encouraged them by expecting them to do well. Now I am planning to go to my publisher to propose that we give those students a chance to write all of the stories in an upcoming edition of Tallahassee Magazine. I have no doubt that they would rise to that occasion. And meanwhile, the truth is that I wouldn't even be thinking about giving the students that opportunity if I had not met with them where they are. At the end of class, I was surrounded by students who asked me what I thought about the Damian Lillard trade, asked me how I liked my on-cloud sneakers, and wanted to know if I had books to suggest. I recommended Fun is Good by minor league baseball team owner Bill Beck. A student recommended to me the books of Robert Greene, an author who writes about power, success strategies, and seduction. Dude, I said to the student, does it look like I need to know something about seduction? The professor wanted to know if I had teaching experience. Indeed, I have some. I taught for many years in the lifelong learning division at Gulf Coast State College before crossing the street and teaching for 5 years here at FSU PC as an adjunct professor of communication. In Tallahassee, I taught for 3 years at Flagler College in the same adjunct role. And for several years, I served as a board member and volunteer instructor here in Panama City at the Chautauqua Learn and Serve Charter School for disabled students. I pause here to let you know that I prefer the word disabled to the phrase living with disabilities. And there may be some disagreement about that. But I was influenced in that regard by a woman Tony Simmons happens to know well, Jillian Visa, who started writing as a Rutherford High School intern at the News Herald when I was editor there. I was speaking to her and I resorted to that phrase, living with disabilities. And she stopped me right there. And she said, Steve, I'm disabled. Call me disabled. Steve, you are old. How would you like it if I referred to you as a man living with years? So, from that point forward, it's been disabled for me. At the Chautauqua School, I assembled a newsroom staff made up of students of widely varying abilities. Against long odds, we were going to produce a school newspaper. Damn it. I wasn't sure the experiment would work out, but I didn't give the team members the slightest indication that I had doubts, and we pulled it off. In fact, my editorial page editor, a wheelchair-bound young man named Joey, wrote an editorial about the need for curb cuts in an area between the school and the nearest trolley stop. He later met with a city engineer, and the cuts were made. Travel, including international travel, is a major part of the curriculum at the Chautauqua School. On one occasion, the school made an overnight trip to Tallahassee. Students from Chautauqua and other schools serving disabled populations met with legislators, and a day later gathered on the steps of the state capitol to read a gubernatorial proclamation related to a disabilities awareness initiative. Chautauqua School Director Cynthia McCauley assigned me and student Landon Reasonover to read that part of the proclamation that had been assigned to our school. Landon was born with half a brain. He has one eye. He is prone to fall. He has spinal issues that make him vulnerable to paralysis. It was a blustery day in Tallahassee. We had steps to manage. But when our turn came, Landon and I approached the microphone eloquence than I, and unrehearsed, Landon flawlessly read his paragraph while I held the proclamation steady in front of his good eye. I had met the disabled where they are, traveled with them, joined in successes with them, and gained immeasurable amounts of empathy and understanding. Early in 2019, a few months after Hurricane Michael ransacked much of Bay County, a good friend, Al Burgermeister, introduced me to Cindy Wilker. She had been chiefly responsible for bringing about the then LGBTQ Center of Bay County, and Al was a founding board member. We met in what had been the center's meeting space, room 6, in the education building at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. The room had been stripped to the studs following a storm. Al, Cindy, and I sat in that empty room on folding chairs and talked about whether an effort to resurrect the center might be worth attempting. "What could you do to help?" Cindy asked me. A former Marine, she was nothing if not direct. I got involved as the center's board vice president and committed to helping out with communication, marketing, and fundraising, while others did the heavy lifting of standing the center back up. When the back up and running center participated in the St. Andrew's Mardi Gras parade, I carried a banner at the head of our parade unit with another straight man, Bob Nixon, from the Unitarian Fellowship here in town. Cindy, the old Marine, looked at us and wept. She and I put self-interest aside and took on the Bay County School Board, the superintendent of schools, and the Bay County Chamber of Commerce when we felt that silence was not an option. I completed training and became a facilitator of youth group meetings at the center. In that role, I met fascinating, intelligent, clever, talented young people who, like their chronological peers everywhere, were engaged in figuring themselves out and contemplating their futures. I met kids who identified as homosexual, bisexual, polyamorous, transsexual, and as, I don't know, I'm still working on it. I met a group member who identified as a dog or a snout. I met kids who had come up with their own unique pronouns for themselves. I met kids who were no strangers to ostracism, rejection, abuse, depression, hunger, and fear. I met kids who just wanted to have fun, and kids with big dreams. I met kids who played by the rules, and kids who bent and stretched them. One evening while leading the group, I chose to ask the kids what topics they would most like to see addressed in future meetings. And they did not list any subjects related to sexual orientation or gender identity. That wasn't their interest. Rather, they wanted to learn how to write a cover letter and a resume and how to prepare for a job interview. They wanted to learn about money management and the rudiments of investing. I was reminded that to think of someone only as gay is to engage in a kind of reductionism or synecdoche. I found that the best way for me to gain the trust of group members was not by preaching or teaching, but by being an active and compassionate listener. And that I was. I met kids where they are. In my neighborhood, I frequently meet up with a man whom I think of as Jim the dog walker. He's an old Navy man who says about his military service that it was like a bad drink. Lots of water, Steve, lots of water. Jim is a latter-day pamphleteer. Thomas Paine in shorts and a sun hat. He hands out copies of a slender volume titled On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. It's written by Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale University. Lesson number 12 is make eye contact and small talk. Writes Snyder, doing so is not just polite, it is part of being a citizen and a responsible member of society. It is a way to stay in touch with your surroundings, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. People who live in fear of repression remember how neighbors treat them. A smile, a handshake, a word of greeting take on great significance. If you affirm everyone, you can be sure that certain people will feel better. I encourage all of you to be affirming of others. Be aspirational. Be inspirational. Be prayerful. Be honest. Be yourself. And meet people, all sorts of people, where they are. Thank you.